Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be discussing how one of Bombura's customers, CRMNEXT, used intent-based segments to personalize Terminus ABM campaigns. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A tab, and we'll try to answer them along the way or at the end of the presentation. Also, we are recording today's webinar, and we will be sending the on-demand link afterwards. So let's go ahead and meet today's speakers. So my name is Marissa Bialik. I'm the Demand Marketing Manager here at Bombura. Bombura is the leading provider of intent data with our branded company Surge Intent Data. With me, I have James Gilbert. He's the head of marketing at CRMNEXT. James, please introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. So before anything, I'm a dad of 4 children. I have a wonderful wife. I'm a big Utah Jazz fan. I'm a big Star Wars nerd, as you can see back there. I've been around marketing and been leading marketing for 18 plus years now. And I was around long enough to know when ABM was very first coined a phrase. So this is going to be a fun topic because I do think intent does play a big role in making sure that ABM is done right. That's just a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, James. We're excited to have you here today.
Likewise.
So today, we're going to cover the importance of using data from multiple sources, why you should segment intent data into multiple topic clusters, and how to make it easy for sales to prioritize which accounts to work and what to say. Now, before we jump into all of that, I know that we're going to be talking about company Surge intent data today. So for anyone who is not familiar with Bombura, let me define it for you quickly. Company Surge intent data tells you which businesses are researching the products and services that you and your competitors sell. This is how Bombura helps marketing and sales leaders prioritize their resources to generate more leads, pipeline, and opportunities. Now, we do this by understanding the usual content consumption patterns of a business against an intent topic in our taxonomy. And these are related to B2B companies, products, solutions, or trends. And we identify when these companies are consuming topics more than they normally do, which is what we call company surge. So company surge is a buying intent signal that indicates when a company may be in market for a particular B2B product or service and the intensity of that interest. So this signal is portable to most systems of records through integrations that we've built, including with Salesforce, Marketo, and Hubspot. And it's also available through more than 35 channel partners, including Terminus, which is what James will be talking about today. So with that, James, I'm going to pass things off to you to tell us about how you and your team at CRMNEXT use intent data.
Yeah, so first of all, we're going to go through how I define intent data. It might be a little different than you might be used to, but intent is around us all over the place. And I think sometimes the little things are really what matter. And when you have intent data, it's got to be, I have a data background. So one of the things you learn really early on when you're doing, statistical analysis and things like that is you've got to triangulate the data. Otherwise, it's not valid. And one of the things that we've done really, really well at CRMNEXT and what I've done at other roles as well is how to bring in multiple sources of intent data so that it actually means something. And the way that I reference this, if you want to go to the next slide, I reference this as it should be a piece of cake. And every cake that I've ever eaten, meaning I'm a little bit chubbier, so you know that I eat cake, right? So the thing is cake is better when it has multiple layers, when it has maybe a crunch or something like that that gives a different texture. So we're going to talk about some of the layers of the cake that I personally weave in as part of intent. The first one is account engagement. So what does that include? Go ahead and click that next. It includes Bombura, review sites, ABM scoring, sales intelligence, personal insights. Go ahead and go to the next layer. You can just click twice and we'll just bring that up right away. There you go. This might be competitive software. Or you might use a vendor to get your technographic data. We do that. I'll explain how we do that today. It could be segmentation, so part of your GTM strategy. Go ahead and go to the next layer. This is one that gets forgot about a lot. We have a dual funnel, so we do ABM, but we also do a lot of traditional demand gen as well. Some of that stuff that you're doing from an SEO perspective absolutely is intent. And you could almost think of it as like your own little version of Bombura. In some cases, it's search signals. And bringing that stuff in oftentimes is not thought about as intent, but it's just thought about as data. But the data can't be just organized. It's got to be acted on as well. And that's the key. Go ahead and go to the next layer. Yeah, go ahead and click one more. Yeah, so market intelligence. This is where we actually bring in specific information related to our total addressable market. That's what TAM stands for. And then our ICP, our ideal customer profile. Go ahead and go to the last one. I think this is the last one. And then to me, this is one of the most important parts, is bringing in customer voice and customer data. So why is this cake so important? Well, one of the reasons why it is because it serves the organization cross-functionally. When you actually start understanding this data and you know how to act on it, you're able to break down silos. And one of the big things that I think is missing in a lot of intent strategies and even ABM strategies is people oftentimes don't bring in other functions of the business. Instead, they build this out and then they expect adoption to happen across sales or across other functions. What oftentimes is missing is those people having a seat at the table to talk about the strategy. Go ahead and do the next part. Yeah, keep going right there. And that's where these really three functions of the business, including product, play a big role in making sure that you're not just focused on the marketing side of the house, but making sure that this stuff can be delivered. Because intent, as it's seen, is oftentimes used as a buying signal, which is good, but it can also be used as a way to make sure that we prevent churn for our customers and things like that. And we can even use it as ways to show product roadmaps and help the product team develop certain things that they might not be thinking about. So intent can go much bigger than just marketing and sales. And that's what I have always used it as.
How long does it take to figure out all of these pieces of the cake?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I've been around a while, so it's taken a while. But what I will say is every single time that I've ever come into a role where I've led marketing at that particular company, the first thing that I do is work with these functions. And I start doing what I call journey mapping. It's, if you're familiar with the customer experience space, it's something that I've learned. And when I do that journey mapping, I'm able to understand the data points that matter most to these functions. And from there, then I'm able to figure out, what areas that we need to feed them. And in a lot of cases, it took me at CRMNEXT about a month to do this. So it's some work, but it took a month to get cross-functional alignment. And now everything that we do from an intent perspective serves every part of our organization.
Awesome. A month isn't too bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. So this is kind of our sort of hub, or it's not our entire tech stack, but just kind of give you an idea. There's certain components of intent and providers that are out there. For us, these are the ones that really matter to us. So who can we serve best and quickest? So that's narrowing down our specific ICP and our TAM. We can't go after everybody. So who are the low-hanging fruit? So we use, like, for example, Fed FIS. They're a technographic provider for the financial services space. So like we can't go to like an HG Insights or a Zoom Info or anything like that. We've got to use very specific things from Fed FIS because they don't touch our addressable market, which is a big reason why we actually worked with Bombura, because Bombura hit our addressable market really, really well. So we did like a pre-test with Bombura before we signed a contract with them. We did a 12 and 6 month look back as well to make sure that the data could be triangulated and that it was relevant to our industry. Fed FIS provides us technographic data as well. And then number two, that's where we use Bombura. We also use G2 Crowd intent data there. We use BuzzSumo to look at, like, search is one thing, but also content is another. And like what type of content is being created out there in the market, that's how you can search for BuzzSumo. You can search social feeds in BuzzSumo there. We obviously use Gartner as a way to just kind of see what the trends of the market are doing, and talking to those analysts becomes important for our roadmap. And then how is the market engaging? This is where we use marketing automation through Hubspot and Terminus, and we also use our podcast and LinkedIn to do that. And a lot of people get confused when I say podcast. But why we even mention the podcast is because we use it as a way to get market research. We only invite folks to the podcast that could potentially be a buyer or are in the market that we actually are trying to serve. So from that perspective, everybody that we have on there, we ask an open-ended question on what they're passionate about and what their challenges are. And then we can actually turn that into a yearly report, a quarterly report that we can send out. So the podcast has actually created our own little version of like being an analyst in the space, but the difference is it's so specific to our TAM and our ICP that we don't have to necessarily go to one of the big analyst firms and pay for that research. We're doing it automatically. So that's how you can use a podcast to utilize intent. Let's answer Cheyenne's question. Do you have any tips for performing your data mapping? Yes. Tip number one. Tip number one is making sure that you do not do it without other executive leaders in the room. What I mean by that is there's just too much information there, and you need to have cross-functional leadership involved in that. And they need to have a seat at the table and have a say. And the other tip that I would say is we oftentimes would get into these little groups that we would call charters. Okay. And a charter is something that would have somebody that was a dedicated champion that could lead that, but then also have other specific people that were cross-functional that could also help do it. You've got to architect the data from the journey map. So I would get in a room with, I'll give you an example. We did this at the very beginning of when I came onto CRMNEXT. I got in a room with the customer success folks and our implementation team and our service team. And for a 2-hour workshop, I literally was the only marketer in there, and I would build the slide out and show them visually. Now, when you focus on journey mapping, the one thing that you want to look at is it's every time the customer could potentially touch your brand. So it's touch points that you want to be able to track. It's not all the nitty-gritty detail of like, hey, we need to do this at this time, and I need to have this type of message, and we need to avoid this. It's the touch points, and you need to visualize that. So I would get in a room with those functions. I've done this several times, and we would literally map out the journeys right then and there. And because I have enough of an understanding of journey mapping, I also know like what a touch point is and what a non-touch point is. And you just have to kind of be the mediator of that group and making sure that you can move it along and continue to build the slide. But by the time we were done with that 2 hours, I usually had a really good understanding of what they wanted to what they wanted to map out, and had half of the slide mapped out. And then I would go back and finish it and then send it to them. And it would be built off of animations. And we've shown that to our executive leadership team and our board. And that has been a big win for us because it shows that we're actually diving deep to try and solve problems and gaps. So I'm going to show you guys some examples of some marketing campaigns that we've ran. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So first of all, when it comes to Bombura, that we paid for unlimited topics. And the reason why we did is because there's a breadth of information out there. We sell a CRM. So we compete with some really big behemoths like Salesforce and Microsoft, specifically in the financial services space. So we needed a way to understand differentiation. And one unique thing that we do differently than a lot of our competition does is we don't sell functionally to a business. So some of those specific offerings that our competition does is very unique to a function. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to see surges across what those functions would be looking at, but also bringing in one cohesive message. So we actually split what we call, I guess Bombura calls them clusters. We call them segments, pretty much the same thing, but we have 9 of them. So the 9th one is like general CRM stuff that they're searching for. The 8th one is, if they're searching for competitives, we can usually triangulate that with also our technographic data to understand if the surges and the searches are Are they looking for educational information, or are they actually looking to switch? And that's a big, big thing. Probably the most important thing that I have ever heard from a lot of marketers out there that ask me questions about intent, especially with Bombura, is, how do you actually know that it's a buying signal? And that's, again, why we have so many of these segments and clusters and why we triangulate it. So what you're seeing is actually a couple of different ways in which the sales reps themselves and executive leaders can actually look at the data against the clusters.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you landed on these 9 topics and what that process was like?
Yeah, great question. Well, these 9 topics, if you take out 8 and 9 and really 7 and 6, 1 through 5 are all areas that we can solve for. And we know that a lot of times what's happening there is people are searching for these things in a silo. So the function of the organization is searching for, a solution for customer experience, or in our case, it's for credit unions, it'd be member experience. Number 4, people search for AI and predictive on their IT team, because that's usually who goes about implementing that kind of stuff. Now, so we came up with these 5 right away. We knew that we needed one just for general banking type of inquiries to kind of see, some people in the financial services industry, they might search for like mobile banking or online banking. If they're searching for that, that's an initiative that they likely have this year. Pain points, those were specific to what we've discovered in our podcast and some of the things that we already knew are pains. And so we wanted to see also, like, are they searching on some of the pain points so that we can validate the pain points for our content strategy as well. And then number 8 and 9, those kind of are, I think, pretty natural for most people. They build those clusters. CRM is what we do. So we would want to know when people are searching for CRM. And then number 8 becomes important because we want to see the triangulation of the technographic data to know if, hey, is this a competitive search? And we can, because we also tie that into G2 Crowd, we can also see, hey, they're searching for alternatives. So that's how we triangulate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, so this is an area that I kind of have been explaining this through the last part, but there's really 5 core places that we pull some of this information and we try to triangulate it. Obviously, we use G2 intent. That includes profile page views, category page views, products, comparison reports. We use the Bombura clusters and the topics that exist there. We look at average score. We also look at how many topics they're surging on. So the count of topics becomes important to us. We look at our ICP, so our ideal customer profile. We designate those in what we call tiers. So we have a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 3, a tier 4. And the focus of tier 1 is all the low-hanging fruit. All of the buying intent signals that we know have been triangulated and we know show a buying signal. Those are what sales and marketing works together on to try to do a joint GTM with and do a joint ABM plan with. Tier 2s become more of marketing's responsibility to try and get expansion so they can become a tier 1. So that's an example of also, like, when you use your ICP, a lot of times people put an ICP in there and they're like, okay, this is our ideal customer profile. Let's go after them. But what they don't realize is there's also intent signals that pull people out of those ICPs. So if it's not dynamic and you don't have a way to make it dynamic, that becomes tough because there could be an account that your sales team is focused on, that marketing is focused on, doing all this air cover and spending all this money on them. And come to find out, they just purchased a competitor a month ago. And so all their surges might show that they have buying signal, but you aren't triangulating that. So then your sales team is wasting all this time, marketing is wasting all this money. And guess what's happening? They're not talking to you, they're talking to a competitor at that point, right? So you've got to make sure that it can also pull out of your tiers and your ICPs, because those do change. We use Terminus ad clicks, obviously a lot through Terminus. That what we're going to mostly show you today is how we've done some advertising and paid through Terminus. But the other side of what we're doing with Terminus is some of the chat functionality, the Sigster integration as well, what we do through email banners. And then the last thing is core systems. So we at CRMNEXT are very focused on that fifth one. That essentially is what determines where they go in a tier, because we've already implemented our product across a lot of different credit unions and community banks. And if we've already done it in that core system, that means we can do it faster than most people can and most of our competition. Go ahead and go to the next one. Okay, so this is a few different screenshots, and this is an example of how we actually use intent in HubSpot. So if you have any marketing automation platform out there, you really can do this if you're allowed multiple scoring models. So we don't just look at the intent data and the Bombura surges and the Terminus stuff. We don't just look at it as singular data points. We bring it all into a scoring model. So our sales reps, when they're able to look at an account, they see an intent score. And we've obviously all came up with a strategy around that and what it looks like and what they want to see as far as like, all right, well, if it's met a threshold of 85 as an intent, that's a good indication that they're looking to buy. So all of the information that you see here are data points related to Bombura, the count of topics, specific to the clusters. So we have every one of the clusters in here, all 9 of them. Terminus, product profile pages, and comparison reviews from G2 Crowd. All of that is combined into one. Because one of the biggest challenges that people have with this is getting adoption with sales that they can act on it. And what often happens is you're sending over alerts from G2 Crowd, you're sending over alerts from Bombura, you're sending over alerts from Terminus, and guess what they have? A whole inbox full of alerts, and they don't give a damn about them. So you've got to make sure that you bring it all in one place, that it can be actionable, but also that if they want to get into the detail, that they can drill into it. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
Sure. Quick question. Is this done on the account level or on the contact level?
This is done on the account level. We also have one on the contact level, but it's just not as valuable for sales because we do approach the accounts. So we have an account-based selling model. All right, so now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of like how to do this in the Terminus platform. So if you can see over here on the left, when you're creating a campaign or a tactic in Terminus, you oftentimes get this screen will populate. So if you select display advertising, you'll see these options for Terminus and G2 Crowd and others. This is where then you go to the next screen and it does an audience selection. So you can, a good example of this is when I was running marketing at CloudCherry, we would actually retarget people that have gone to the G2 Crowd comparison and compared one of our competitors. And we would send them to a page, and on that page, it would be a much deeper analysis of like how we were different than the competition. And I think too often people will just send them to the comparison report or send them somewhere where they can already find that information. They want more, and you've got to be able to provide that and a unique experience. So we do the same thing here at CRMNEXT, where we then send them down a specific road, which I'll show you. And then also in the audience selection, you're able to select those competitive topics and the count of topics, any cluster that you want. As long as it's synced with Terminus, you can pull that in specifically here. The other thing is in the data studio with Terminus, how you use Bombura specifically in the data studio is a little different. So if you don't have the full package of Terminus's platform, you might not be able to use the data studio. If you do, the data studio can be leveraged to create lists and segments that then can be triggered to send advertising to, or to do something very specific with Sigster and an email banner, or to do something specific with their chat experience. So how we do this is we've only got a specific amount of the clusters in here. And you're seeing that right there in the box, and we can basically reference those and segment those into lists. And then we can trigger off of the count of topics, or even on the far right, you can actually see, we can send specific campaigns to those that are surging on one of our competitors. And if we've triangulated that, we also have in here, which you're not seeing because There wasn't a way to show you that because it's a scroll method, but that max intent score at the very bottom, right below the orange box, that is that aggregate score of intent. So we can then combine those two areas and say, all right, do they have max intent score of 85 or higher? And are they surging on a competitor? That tells us, one, they're looking to buy, and two, they're looking at a competitor, and we might not be part of the conversation. So then we can actually send them an advertising piece that says, hey, like, let me tell you why you should look at us. Like, that's not the message that we do. We'll show you a little bit of those examples and what's been successful. Go ahead and go on. Next piece is, again, a way for reps and how to look at this on an account level. So again, this is the competitive research that we look at. This is a pretty old screenshot, but it's still pretty relevant, and it changes. Nice thing is too is because Bombura does their searches every week. It's a refresh, right? So what's in here is unique every single week, and that's one of the things that our reps really love, is that it's data that's refreshed. It's not something that stays stale, and that's important too. This is an example of how we did like a competitive campaign. Okay, you can see the ads that we had. We wanted to make this really fun. So rather than sending them even to the page that we did at CloudCherry, we wanted to send them down an experience that they'd never forget. So we came up with this fun idea of using Banklorette. And we're all familiar with The Bachelorette. It's very similar to that. The only difference is we actually hired actors and actresses to be the part of one of our competitors, including us. And we would make fun of us and we would make fun of them. But in the messaging was all the differentiation between us and our competition. So they got the ad. And one of the things that we did right out of the gates was talk about what CRM really was meant to be. And it was meant to be about relationships. So why don't you allow us to date you and show you what that's really like, right? Then they go down to the landing page, which you saw right there, in an email component, which brings them to a series of videos that they get to watch about each competition that we have. I think there might be one more image on this slide. Nope. Well, that one went away. Go ahead and go to the next one. It might be kind of slow. Yeah, you can go to sales intel. That's okay.
All right. Quick question that came in on the last slide is, do you ever adjust the message of the ad based on specific topics of interest?
Oh yeah, all the time. So, I mean, you could kind of see a little bit of an example with that with the Banklorette. We wouldn't send that ad to anyone who wasn't surging on our competition, right? I mean, that wouldn't really make sense. It would maybe make sense from like the perspective of educating people that might need to know what CRM is, right? We could do that alongside, but we also send very specific messaging and advertising as it relates to certain topics. One example would be if somebody is surging on mobile banking or online banking, we'll send them something very specific on what we do that's totally different than the competition. And the message might be something like, yeah, do you use Alchemy or NCR, which is a technology platform for the banks and credit unions? And, you know, the landing page that they then go to and the chat experience that they then go to is totally unique. What I didn't show you on the Banklorette too is the ad, the email was only one part, right? We have an entire like page that they can go through and digest content. They also had a unique chat experience that we built where we would like invite them to dinner or lunch, because that's what you do on a date, right? You take them out, wine and dine them. And then also we brought in a direct mail piece. And that direct mail piece, if you are familiar with the Bachelorette, they hand long stem roses to, you know, those who are accepted. So we took a different play on this because the whole messaging was about relationships lasting. We used Sendoso's integration, and we would trigger a Sendoso direct mail piece to go out that was a rose that could last up to 5 years. Same messaging, right? And the beautiful thing about that is the entire campaign, from the moment in which they saw the ad to every interaction and every touch point through their journey was unique and was a wow moment for them. And I think that's really key to building these type of campaigns as well.
Creative campaign you guys did. Very cool.
Kathleen, looks like you have a question. The banker concept, very clever. Does your audience have the same demographics as the infamous TV show? Not even close, but we know that our ICP and some of the persona work that we've done, we already knew that it was going to resonate. It is still, like, a year later, it's performing better than really any campaign that we've ever done. And you know, unfortunately with the news of like everything that's going on with The Bachelorette, like we had to kind of like shift. We were going to do a season 2. So we'll have to see who the new host is going to be of The Bachelorette, and we might bring back a season 2, and you guys can all see that type of campaign come to fruition.
Nice.
But we were having people that were totally outside our ICP and TAM ask about this campaign. And you know, I just, like, my team did such a good job with it, and we executed on it just really well. So we were having people totally outside our ICP and TAM that were asking about it, which got our name out there even more from a brand recognition perspective. So that was a lot of fun. Let's dive into the sales intel. You want to go ahead and go to the next? Yeah, there we go. So what does sales see? If you're looking at like just companies in general, they obviously get a slew of data that they could dive into if they wanted to. Again, not always the recommendation, because I think that it's hard for people to act on that. So that's why we have the intent score. But you can see the intent score in the middle. You see G2 and then you see Bombura all there. And then over on the right, you see our ICP segment. We used to call those tiers. Now we call them segments. But anything that a rep wants to look at, they can look at here. They can also use this as filter criteria as well. So if they want to filter off of all of their intent, all of their accounts that have an intent score of 85 or higher, they can do that. If they want to filter off of specific topics in Bombura that we've got here on our roll-up topics, they can do that. If they want to filter on anybody who has G2 intent, they can do that. Or if they want to do all 3, they could do that to get the lowest hanging fruit. Go ahead and go to the next one. This is just a scroll of that same view. Obviously, it's tough to show that, but this also shows all of the ad impressions, the clicks that are specific to Terminus. The Terminus impressions and being able to show this, the reason why this becomes important is because before we launch a campaign in Terminus, we do work directly with our sales organization. So here's a really good piece of advice. If you have a small marketing team, or even if you have a large one and you have a large sales organization, we started doing what we call a buddy system with sales. So we assigned a marketer with a sales rep, or 2 sales reps or 3 sales reps, whatever you feel like you can handle there. And the reason why that became really, really important, because sometimes, like a lot of times, sales doesn't really know all the stuff that's going on that marketing is doing. Even if you're really good at planning it together and all that fun stuff. So we actually bring the buddy system in, and each one of our folks on our marketing team are able to buddy up with sales. And so they can tell them exactly which ads these accounts received and which ones they clicked on. And so the entire marketing team is well-versed enough to know that. Even, by the way, like designers on our team are able to do that. So that's another way that we do that. Terminus engagement and the ad impressions and clicks become really, really important for us. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then this is just another view of like how you can see it in a journey view. You can see in the middle, this is like traditionally where you'd see like a lot of your marketing on the account, where you'd see G2 information. Over on the left is your Terminus impressions. You can see Bombura marketing topics and specific clusters. So when sales is on their dashboard and they drill into an account, they don't have to dive into detail. They see it right here on the account view, and then they can make a decision on like, hey, do we want to send them this sequence that's specific around these? Cheryl, yes, these views right here are in HubSpot. You could think of this as like if you use a different CRM or marketing automation platform, it might be a little bit unique to what you could show as well. Go ahead and go to the next one. And then from a dashboard, when they drill into seeing this view, so if they click one of those bars, it's drillable and it goes right into here. And then they can also see like the full roll up of the topics. And that is the sales intelligence that we provide. I mean, there's obviously a lot more, but this is pretty much it. From a Terminus and Bombura perspective, I mean, they've been two big game changers for us. So, I mean, remember the cake, and I built the cake so that you could see it visually, but it's really important to use multiple sources, always triangulate the data. And then number 2, segment, and get it down to a narrower list. You should never focus on, well, here's an example. Topo back in 2019, actually 2018, I apologize. They had, I can't remember if it was either Oracle or it was Adobe, but 2 very big companies, right? They were up there on stage giving a keynote. And one of the things that they said was they don't even focus on more than 20 accounts as an entire company, right? So if that's, or excuse me, 200 accounts. So if that's the case, then we should not be, if you're a smaller organization, we should not be focused on, maybe anything more than 20, right? So that's something to think about. Get it narrower, make sure that you use those segments, and build your clusters. And then the last thing is making it easy for sales to prioritize. You can see how we do a little bit of that. We obviously didn't show you everything, but some of the things in which we do that is we have a dashboard that's specific to each rep. So every rep has their own unique dashboard that they can go into and look at their day, their week, look at how things are surging, look at how Terminus is providing that information to them. And then, being able to onboard them onto a new engagement path it becomes really important.
That's great, James. Yeah, go ahead and submit your questions into the Q&A tab. One question that came in is, what are some of the results that you've seen to date from using all of these tools?
I'm glad you asked. We are a very different marketing organization here at CRMNEXT. We're very revenue driven. So if you're not, if you haven't yet adopted that, it's okay. There's still time. But we have generated 98% of the revenue from marketing, which is pretty incredible. So we also, I know that there's a lot of controversy around like tracking influence and things like that. But I'm here to tell you, like, I've been around a long time, and attribution is very, very important. I'll just say that. And it's not just important to understand how well you're doing across channels, but it's very, very important to understand how it's impacting the journey of a buyer. And that's where I think so many folks get caught up on, as they think, well, I got to track first touch and last touch. And what we've been able to show and prove through doing multi-touch attribution and the influence across the middle of the funnel is how many touches buyers are having that generate revenue for us. We're able to show, like, okay, all this stuff in the middle, if we were only tracking first and last touch, we would have missed all of it, right? If you think about vendor comparison sites like G2 Crowd or Trust Radius or any of those, right? They're all middle touches, all of them. So if you're always looking at first and last touch, you're never going to get an ROI on those if you're looking for an ROI. And I would even go so far to say, like, when we track ROI with Bombura, guess what? Those search signals in a lot of cases are middle touches. So if you're not tracking the full buyer journey and doing attribution against that, it becomes really tough to show the value and results. I mean, we've got 98%. We're still, by the way, trending upwards. We're almost at 100% right now. 98% of all revenue has been sourced for marketing. And that's pretty hard to do. So if we look at pipeline as well, 92% of all pipeline has come from marketing as well. And that's because we do everything that we do is cohesive with sales. We never do anything. As a matter of fact, there's a good rule that I always like to look at. As a marketer, you have 3 lenses to look through: the one who buys, the one who sells, and the one who keeps the customer alive. Customer success, sales, okay, and the actual prospect or customer. And if you're looking through the lens of all 3 of those all the time, you're going to know that you can't like just do spray and pray anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Rini, I want to get to your question. This has been great. Let's see here. Do you think there's still value to be had from tools like Bombura when you don't have the tactical advantage of the integrated approach you've taken here? And how would you recommend that? Absolutely. I do think that there is more value when you can actually get more than like 25 topics, which is usually where it starts. And the only reason why I say that is because what we did the very first month that we signed with Bombura, we did a 6 and 12 month look back. So we looked at all surges across all of our TAM. So we already knew who our TAM was and our ICP. That's key, Rini. Make sure that you do that first. So if you don't know who your TAM and ICP is, focus there and then figure out how you can actually tie that to Bombura data. Because when we did that 6 and 12 month look back, we identified topics that we had no idea were out there, one, and we identified topics that we also submitted to Bombura to be used in the future, right? And some of those got accepted and some of them were like, yeah, we don't have enough search signals here. So we've actually also helped in some ways empower our own like Bombura's own product to help us even more by doing some of that. Any chance you could send us an example slide you've done for customer journey mapping? Do me a favor, drop your name in and what company you work for. And I would be happy to follow up with you via LinkedIn and send you some journey mapping examples.
Awesome. James, it looks like we have one more question in the chat here, which you kind of touched on already, but what are the key KPIs you use to measure success?
Revenue, pipeline created, and then we look at engagement. So I have a marketing ops background, guys, so you got to understand that I know that not everybody has the sophistication to track this stuff. But it all starts somewhere, and those 3 areas, I'm going to just focus on engagement because the other 2 are pretty self-defined, like everybody knows what those are. How we look at engagement is not just like, okay, here's a score on what they're doing with our marketing, and that's great, right? Oh, they're hot right now. We look at change over time. So people could score in your traditional marketing methods up to almost, quote unquote MQL, or even an MQA if you have an ABM model. They could score all the way there in January and February, but then not have any engagement the next 3 months, right? And your sales team looks at that and they're like, oh, wow, like they're really hot, but it's not a dynamic model. So we've actually created a dynamic model where they can see real time, real engagement across their accounts. So that score that happened in January and February, it decays unless there's new engagement. So this is where marketing also becomes really, really important to ensuring like, all right, we need to get more engagement on these specific accounts because they're starting to decay. So I think you have to have decay models built if you're doing any scoring. I think scoring models are extremely important, no matter who tells you that they're not. I think they are. And I think it allows you to get another level of a data point that you can use as intent. Did that answer your question?
I think that was a great answer.
All right.
And I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, James, for sharing your experience with intent data. and have a great day, everyone.